friends, happy Martini Monday. It just so happens to be Valentine's Day when I'm filming this, so happy Valentine's Day to you and your lovers, lover, the crush that you think about in your head all the time, whomever. This Valentine's Day, even though it was Friday and today's Monday, I posted a blog of 14 movies that you can watch with your situationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, sister, mother. Doesn't matter. It's just a list of 14 good movies that I think embody Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day or whatever you celebrate, or neither. So with that said, go check that out, give it a read, give it a scroll, give it a like, please. And we're gonna get right into the movies that I watched this week. So grab a drink, get comfortable, because as you know, this could get lengthy. I have a lot to say, as always. Okay, so I only really watched 4 movies this week, 5 if you want to be technical and count the 1996 Baz Luhrmann version of Romeo and Juliet, but I didn't really watch it. I just had it on in the background while I was editing. So first movie I watched this week, and the movie that just like left such a mark on me that I can't believe I've never heard of it before, Tangerine, 2015, directed by Sean Baker. I knew it was directed by Sean Baker with the pacing right when it kicked off, and the beautiful use of daylight as he does in Anora. Like, he has such a specific style of filmmaking that I love. But really, like, the way that you just felt like a character thrown into this day, which we'll get into the plot in a moment, but I didn't feel like I was sitting at home watching a movie. I felt like I was there experiencing it with the cast, and it was so fast and it was so brilliant, and I loved it. And I just loved the pacing, similarly to Anora. Like, he really knows how to have 90 minutes feel like 10 years with these people. Like, I feel like I know everything about them, and you barely scratch the surface because you're only getting a glimpse of that one day. I'm gonna read the direct log line from Letterboxd, okay, so I don't mess this up. It's Christmas Eve in Tinseltown, and Cindy is back on the block. Upon hearing that her pimp boyfriend hasn't been faithful during the 28 days she was locked up, the working girl and her best friend Alexandra embark on a mission to get to the bottom of the scandalous rumor. Their rip-roaring odyssey leads them through various subcultures of Los Angeles, including an Armenian family dealing with their own repercussions of infidelity. Sex workers, specifically Cindy and Alexandra, but mainly it's them going on this journey through this area of Los Angeles, and it's an entire, like, altercation. It starts with an altercation, simply Alexandra telling Cindy, hey, your boyfriend's cheating on you. And then the whole film is Cindy trying to figure out the truth behind this while taking Alexandra on this wild journey. And then it builds up to this final scene with the entire ensemble in Donut Time, which is where we start the film. And watching behind the scenes and hearing Sean Baker talk about it, he speaks about the importance of filming on that street, the importance of having Donut Time in the film, because sex workers would use that area as a place for shelter when they were working on the street. And also seeing him talk about how filming in that area, and specifically on that street, I think it's on Santa Monica and Highland, and Sean Baker himself says that they were shooting at the time where that area was beginning to be gentrified, and now if you look at that street, it's completely gentrified. Donut Time isn't even there anymore. So in the 10 years since its movies came out, just seeing how vastly Los Angeles has changed, specifically a street that was so known for its like underground culture of sex work. And I think what this film does a beautiful job of is not that it pays no mind to the sex work, but it's not the driving force of the story. Like, we don't really know much about Cindy's past. We don't really know why Cindy was arrested, why she was in prison for 28 days. And honestly, it didn't feel like it mattered. The fuel of the story is the relationship between Cindy and Alexandra, and their performances are so incredible. They're so rich. They're so raw that's why it feels like a documentary. And that also goes with the pacing. I think it has to go with the production design of the film and really utilizing all of the natural aspects of Los Angeles and the streets. And that radiates throughout the film. It radiates throughout the film, and I think that's why it had such critical acclaim, because it's real. It's a real story about real people in a real area that doesn't really exist anymore because of gentrification. It's so tangible, and he does such a good job also with creating conflict, and we see that in the final scene of Tangerine. We see that in the final scene of Anora, with just so much chaos and mixed in with the sound design and the dialogue, and everybody's talking, and there's different languages, so there are language barriers and people aren't able to understand each other. And yet, even though there are language barriers in this film, being Cindy, Alexandra, Ramzik, and his Armenian family, and then in Anora, with the Russian family. Even though I don't speak that language, I know exactly what's happening because the performances are so incredible and they're so captivating. I really love this film. I gave it 5 stars, and I love how they showed a different side of Los Angeles than we're used to seeing in films. I think the underbelly of Los Angeles and the severity of homelessness and gentrification in the city is often only depicted in independent films. Like, I think Pleasure is a really great film that takes place in Los Angeles about sex work. Tangerine, obviously, I'm recommending this to you. This was brilliant. And I'm sure there's plenty more. I have an entire list on Letterboxd that kind of like feels like this similar vibe, and most of the ones that tackled those real issues rather than just La La Land and Hollywood's all glitz and glamour, they're independent films. So I absolutely think you should check this out. I think the final scene in this film is absolutely beautiful. Cindy and Alexandra are in a laundromat because someone spills pee on her, and they just really have a beautiful moment together where Cindy has to take off her wig, and it's kind of the first time in the film that we see her without her wig, her clothes, like dolled up, and she's just so, you can tell that she's uncomfortable not having that protection, and Alexandra removes her wig and gives it to Cindy to wear so she can feel more comfortable in the laundromat, and I think that's really beautiful. And I think especially at a time like this in our country where there's so much hate towards trans people, this film does a beautiful job of showing that they're no different than anybody else just because somebody is trans, and their experience and their body and their sexuality or whatever doesn't affect you in any way. So you really should stop acting like they're a threat to your livelihood. The next film I watched was Final Destination 2000, directed by James Wong, and I gave it 3 stars because I thought this was the perfect like 2000s horror. It had the great structure. It was, I mean, it's everything. However, A Final Boy, like I was not expecting that at all. I thought it was like a great cheesy horror flick, but I think the one with the roller coaster is the one that I wanted to watch because I've seen it on TikTok so much. So maybe I just had higher expectations for Final Destination because I love Saw and I love Hostel and I love Scream and I love all of those franchised horror movies. I feel like Final Destination maybe fell a little flat, and it could be that the lead was a boy. I don't know. I just like, I prefer the lead in horror being a girl, being a woman. Like, I love a final girl. If one person told me, if I was on a plane and one person told me, I think this plane's gonna crash, I'd get off. I wouldn't second guess it. I wouldn't care if that flight was me going to my wedding. I'm not getting on that damn plane. And that's before even seeing this movie. I just wouldn't do that. I'm incredibly superstitious, and as of this week, I think I've discovered that I have anxiety. I can't get on that kind of fucking plane. The things that go through my mind when I fly are, I wouldn't wish those thoughts on anybody. Because they're not just, oh, this plane's going down. It's like, this plane's going down and I'm going to be the only survivor, but nobody's going to be able to help me, and I'm going to have shrapnel cut my body in half, and I'm just going to lay there and bleed out and feel myself die. And then I also have this, like, terrible fear of dying and then, like, seeing my dead body, like, my soul coming out of my body and, like, seeing myself dead. Poor teacher. Oh my God. Teachers don't get paid enough, and this movie is proof. Like, damn. All for a school trip to France? I mean, they must have gone to a nice school, because school trip to France? Our French department went to Quebec. Granted, it's only like several hours from here, no plane, just a bus. Loved the one part where the girl's like getting on the phone and she puts an Alka-Seltzer tablet in her cup and it starts to fizz up, and I immediately thought of Taxi Driver, and I was like, something crazy is about to happen. It wasn't like, nothing crazy happened. And if you are like, that's the crazy thing of, like, the plane blows up, like, they die in really weird ways, but I feel like after seeing Hostel and Saw, I wanted a little bit more. I thought it was 3 stars. I think it's fun. I think it's a really great horror movie. If you're looking for those 2000s, like, cheesy, follow a very specific type of storyline, this is for you. And it's on Max. But I will say, I'm gonna have to watch the other ones and see if they're better, or if I just have seen way too many TikToks edits of Final Destination. That's kind of like glamming the movie up a little bit more. Next movie I watched is The Panic in Needle Park, 1971. It's available on Prime. I watched this movie simply because in the Girls episode, season 5, Panic in Central Park? Panic in the Park? Panic in Central Park, season 5, episode 6. If you are a Girls fan like myself, people often refer to this as the greatest episode in the entire series. And it's because, spoiler alert for Girls, Marnie and Charlie are together in season 1. Season 2, they're kind of like on and off. Season 2 ends with them declaring their love for each other and being like, we want to get married and have kids. And then season 3, Charlie's nowhere to be found, and apparently he just up and left. What actually happened was Charlie, Christopher Abbott, who played Charlie, left the show. Season 5, Lena Dunham had reached out to him to come back and like finish off or like tie up loose ends with his storyline, and that's what we get. Panic in Central Park, which is one of my favorite episodes. And this ties into Tangerine because at the end of that episode, which I could do an entire analysis on this episode and the episode where Hannah finds out that Jessa and Adam are seeing each other, I could do an entire Girls like breakdown, and we can do that if you want to. Let me know. At the end of this episode, Marnie, she like sees Charlie again, and he now has an accent, wears a lot of denim, has a beard, is bald, and it's revealed throughout the episode that he is doing heroin, and he's obviously some kind of drug dealer, whatever. And so she realized that, and mind you, she's married to Cousin from The Bear. She's married to Desi, and they make music together, but she's not happy with him, and she just kind of like rushed into the marriage because Marnie's the kind of girl that feels like she needs to do things to like prove to herself in society that she's like secure, even though she's not. So when she sees Charlie again, they like have this magical evening where they're running around the city and they go to dinner, and she's in this gorgeous dress, and then they go to a party and she gets money from this guy who thinks that she's a prostitute. And then they have this fabulous Italian dinner and eat spaghetti, and then they fall into water, and then they're on the train home soaking wet, and she sleeps at his apartment, wakes up the next morning, takes a shower, sees that he's a heroin addict, and gets her dress on and leaves. And she walks from his apartment all the way back to hers. And by the end of it, her feet are so dirty. They are like, it's like she has a thin black paste on the bottom of her feet. Dinah in Tangerine, when Cindy goes to get her because that's the girl that's been sleeping with her boyfriend, she drags her out of this motel and drags her through the streets of Los Angeles, and by the end of the film, her feet have that same like black paste. And then I watched The Panic in Needle Park because in one of the behind the scenes, Lena Dunham is talking about that inspiration for this episode. And if you watch Girls or you watch Insecure, or really any show on HBO Max, they have those behind the scenes at the end of the episode, which you should totally watch. I'm gonna read the log line directly from Letterboxd for you. A stark portrayal of life among a group of heroin addicts who hang out in Needle Park in New York City, played against the setting of a low-key love story between Bobby, a young addict and a small-time hustler, and Helen, a homeless girl who finds in her relationship with Bobby the stability she craves. So I think this film is really beautiful. I think it's shot really well. I think I was unfortunately plagued by comparison with this film because all I kept thinking about was the Panic in Central Park episode. And so for a long time I've been meaning to watch this. And it stars Al Pacino and Kitty Wynn. I'm again gonna read you the logline directly from Letterboxd for you. A stark portrayal of life among a group of heroin addicts who hang out in Needle Park in New York City, played against the setting of a low-key love story between Bobby, a young addict and a small-time hustler, and Helen, a homeless girl who finds in her relationship with Bobby the stability she craves. So I think this film is really beautiful. I think it's shot really well. I think I was unfortunately plagued by comparison with this film because all I kept thinking about was the Panic in Central Park episode and drawing parallels between Marnie and Helen, which is unfair to this film, but I just thought it was really great. I thought it reminded me a lot of Candy, if you've ever seen that with Heath Ledger, where he plays a drug addict and his addiction bleeds into his partner, and then she becomes an addict and she resents him for it. And so I think films like this, where it talks about the complexities of addiction and relationships and how they intertwine and how your addiction doesn't only affect you, it affects the people around you. This film does a really beautiful job of that with the backdrop of New York City. And similarly to Tangerine, it's very tangible in the sense of like you can feel the air in New York City as everything's unfolding in this film. And I just think it's really beautiful. But now, after spoiling Panic in Central Park for you, if you watch this, maybe you also will be plagued by those comparisons. To that, I apologize. I think also, yeah, Candy, very similar. Requiem for a Dream, very similar. Trainspotting. Beautiful Boy, Basketball Diaries. Like, any film about a young person who falls into addiction, and most of the time it's like not their fault, it's a fault of their circumstance or the area in which they're brought up in, because as we know, people who grow up in low income areas have a harder time transitioning or getting out of that situation into a higher income, or like stepping up wealth class in America, as we call it. But it's really interesting when you watch these films and see the circumstances that made people become addicts. And I think Beautiful Boy is always a really great reference. And the book too, also, but the movie's great with Timothée Chalamet and Steve Carell. This movie I watched, and maybe I think Tangerine's my favorite. Skate Kitchen is next, 2018, directed by Crystal Massell. This movie's perfect. This movie's fantastic. Do you like mid-90s? Here you go. With women! With girls! Because skating is not just dominated by boys and men. Let me tell you that. Growing up, all I ever wanted was to be a skateboarder. I don't know what it was. Like, I got a Camp Rock skateboard for like my 8th or 9th birthday, and I just rode that shit. All I could do was ride. I can't do any tricks or anything, but I always wanted to be a skateboarder. And then I got to high school and I found a legal civ. And I became obsessed. But I begged and begged and begged like every year for a skateboard for Christmas, and I never got one. So I bought one from Target, and I'm not very good, but like, I don't know why. I just always have felt drawn to skateboarding, and like, I really wanted to do that. And so, like, Ryder McLaughlin, was obsessed with him. Nico Haraga, obsessed with him. Obsessed with everybody in Illegal Civ. So when mid-90s came out, I was geeked and gagged. I was like, yes! Oh my god, mid-90s, like, this is my shit. And so imagine my surprise when I found out that the pictures that I've been saving to my Pinterest mood board for a screenplay I'm working on are from Skate Kitchen. The log line again so I don't get confused. Camille's life as a lonely suburban teenager changed dramatically when she befriends a group of skateboarders. Girl skateboarders. As she journeys deeper into this raw New York City subculture, she begins to understand the true meaning of friendship as well as her inner self. So I love this movie. Obviously, if you've seen mid-90s, there's parallels. It's very similar. However, what this film does such a beautiful job of is depicting teenage girl friendships and how something so small can break them apart. And it's usually a boy, which I made a TikTok about this, Jaden Smith, and the nice guy and guy's friend groups, and how they're usually like the devil reincarnate. But I just really admired the overlapping friendships and like the complex relationships these girls had, where like one day they're all friends, and the next day they're like talking bad about somebody else, and then whatever, but it's like it's all in love. Because I think when the beautiful thing about female friendships, especially in high school when you have like a big group of girlfriends, is that you become so close and you have something in common. For these girls, it was skateboarding and wanting to succeed as female skateboarders when they're constantly being pushed out by the boys. And in high school, just girls in general, like coming of age and especially in like heteronormative society or whatever, like coming together over like boys and having boys be the thing that separate you, but also the thing that brings you together in the end. And I just love the conversations that they had. I think a lot of time, like in mid-90s, are stories about boys coming of age. It's often about like losing their virginity and sex and hypermasculinity and needing to be like strong and like, God forbid you're gay or perceived as a pussy, where when these girls have conversations, they're engaging and they listen to each other and they're sharing experiences that they've had, sexual experiences, familial experiences. And I just think it's on a deeper level because girls are allowed to have those conversations. And you see that bleed into films about boys coming of age, because the way that girls and boys are brought up, especially in American society, is polar opposites. So though girls are so emotional and irrational, it's because they're able to talk about and connect with their feelings and share that with their other girlfriends, where boys aren't able to express that as freely. So I just thought this film did a really good job of depicting that. I loved the costume design. I don't know if it was costume design or if it was what these girls actually wore, but I mean, it's so, again, with the background of New York City, it's just so authentic. And I think that's why so many people are drawn to Mid90s, even though they say it's just a movie about vibes. It's a coming of age story. But I think we're very used to like a coming of age story that has a rounded arc where there's like an inciting incident and then there's all the stuff that happens and then it fizzles out with the resolution. But when you come of age at every point in your life. When you're a preteen, you come of age. You come of age again in high school. You come of age again in college. You come of age again after college. And you come of age again in your 30s and your 40s. You're constantly growing and evolving. The coming of age genre isn't limited to middle school and high school and like figuring out your sexuality or what you want to be for the rest of your life. I think that's like the easiest coming of age story that you can tell. I think the harder ones are when you get older or when you broaden them to have an ensemble cast, because it shows that we're all coming of age at the same, not at the same time or in the same way, but together. And the goal for everybody is growth. And so with Camille, you know, from her mother's perspective, she just wants her to be safe and careful. And in the very beginning of the film, she gets injured on a skateboard, and it's really abrupt and like the blood kind of made me queasy. But from her mother's perspective, she's like, I just don't want you to get hurt. And from Camille's perspective, skating is her freedom of expression. It's how she meets friends. It's how she, you know, like expresses herself. And so her mother telling her to never do that again, or like promise you won't ever do that again, she feels like her identity is being taken away. And when you're a teenager, your hobbies and your friends are your personality. Like, that's what you live and breathe. That's what you do. That's who you think you are, because you don't know anything else. You're like, okay, I skateboard. That's who I am. I'm a skater. And then when you get older, you realize that you don't have to just be one thing. Camille doesn't just have to be a skater. Like, a skater is just one facet of her personality. Like, she's also a good friend, and she's really kind, and she's really compassionate. Even though, you know, she had that little incident with her best friend. All these girls were incredibly talented actresses. I don't know if they were acting or if it was very similar where they were skaters and then this naturally just kind of flowed into acting. I just think it's beautiful, and I really love complex stories about female friendship, and I think that's why I go back to shows like Girls and Insecure and Sex and the City so often. But I wish that there was more of it in those, like I really loved season 1 of Sex Life of College Girls, but I don't like season 2 and 3 because I think it like completely went away from what its original goal was. But there's so many movies like Superbad or all these like comedies about boys coming of age and like sex and whatever. And I feel like that's not as common with female stories. And that's why I love Bottoms, and I love Booksmart, and I love Skate Kitchen, and I love Tangerine. I just love hearing stories about women. I really think you should watch Skate Kitchen, especially if you're a Mid90s fan. More reason for you to watch it. I also think this falls into the same camp as like 13, Lords of Dogville. I love that movie. Catherine Hardwicke is one of my favorite directors. She directed the original Twilight, if you didn't know. So with that, those are the movies I watched this week. I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe you watch one of them. If I had to pick 2 to recommend to you, I would absolutely recommend Tangerine and Skate Kitchen first, then Panic in Needle Park, then Romeo and Juliet, then Final Destination. But since today's the day I'm filming this is Valentine's Day, I uploaded a 14 movies you can watch with your situationship vlog. You should totally check it out. You don't have to watch it with anybody. You can watch it by yourself. I just wanted a fun title. But that's it. Happy Martini Monday. Till next time, stay flirty, stay thirsty. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. Read my blog if you feel like it. It really helps though, especially if you read it and you like it. It's such a small little, but it makes such a huge difference, I promise. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Anyway, I love you so much. Really, thank you. It means a lot. Chin chin! I should have a cocktail, but as always, I don't. Oh, God.